actually,
good to meet you as well.
We did meet briefly once. I don't know if you remember this or not. It's a story from back a few years ago in Carlow. But I can get to it a little bit later anyway. But look, I just wanted to welcome you. Thanks very much for coming on to the podcast. I'm really glad that you accepted the offer. My guest today is Richard Moore, and Richard is the founder of the charity organisation Children in Crossfire. And there's a very little story behind the charity name for that. I don't want to give too much away, because when I met you, I heard your story in person, and I'd love for our listeners to hear it from you as well. So you might start from the ground up, Richard, if you would, because I know you grew up in Craig in Derry, and it wouldn't be the typical childhood that everybody else would have.
Yeah, I first of all, Anthony, thanks very much for inviting me onto the podcast here. I'm delighted to be part of it, and I'm more than happy to share my story with you as well. I, as you rightly point out, grew up in Derry. I lived in Derry all my life. I was born in 1961, so I'm 59 years of age now, and I remember Derry and Northern Ireland before the conflict started. In 68, 69 was the beginnings of the conflict in Northern Ireland, and Derry was at the epicenter of that, the civil rights marches and that sort of thing at the time. But I remember, prior to that, the Craigan where I lived being a lovely, peaceful, pleasant place to live. And, out playing football on the street, watching the bobby on the beat, the policeman walking up through the area, just like any normal society anywhere. And then what seemed like overnight to me, the Craigan seemed to plunge into violence and became like a war zone. And I'm sure it was much more gradual than that, but for me, it seemed like overnight. And outside our front door, the adults were digging up the pavements and breaking them up and using the broken pavements to build barricades or to, as missiles, to throw at the British Army or the police. And there was hijacked cars, buses, lorries, all put across the road, setting fire and all that sort of stuff. And then eventually, you saw the thing escalate, the shootings and bombing incidents were a daily occurrence almost. And the Craigan became known as a no-go area. And in January 1972, you had what was sadly a very famous incident in Derry, which is Bloody Sunday, where 13,000 people were shot dead by the British Army in the streets of Derry. And arguably the weeks and months that followed Bloody Sunday were among the most violent period in the history of the Northern Ireland conflict. In fact, I think 1972 was probably one of the most violent years. And I went to Rosebound Primary School, and Rosebound Primary School was on the edge of the Craigan estate, and it was right beside a police station. And as you can imagine, a police station right beside a no-go area was a target for the IRA and a target for rioters. So eventually the British Army were brought in to protect that police station. And you had these, what I would describe as semi-permanent military installations set up there. These army lookout posts or sangers or sandbag huts, whatever you want to call them. And there were basically military huts, and the army were inside these huts, keeping watch, through a porthole. So there were lookout posts. And one of these army lookout posts faced up into my school, up through the playground of the school. And on the 4th of May 1972, which is about just 3 months after Bloody Sunday, I got out of school as normal. And me and my friends were having a race along the bottom of the school football pitch. And I was 10 years of age at the time. And I remember running past this army lookout post on my right-hand side. And, as I got close to it, I was about 10 feet away from it, a British soldier fired a rubber bullet. The rubber bullet hit me in the bridge of the nose. And I lost my right eye. I was permanently blinded, my left eye. So I'm blind now about, whatever it is, 48 years. So I went to hospital and all that sort of stuff, Anthony, and spent 2 weeks in hospital all during that time, I thought that I couldn't see because of the bandages on my eyes. I didn't realise that I was blind. And it was only about a month after I was shot that my brother Noel, well, I was out home. I got out of hospital after 2 weeks, as I say. And all along, I thought it was the bandages that were preventing me from seeing. And my brother Noel, when I was out of hospital, about, as I say, about a month after I was shot, he took me for a walk up and down our back garden. And this particular day, he said to me, "Richard, do you know what has happened to you?" And I said, "Yes, I knew I was shot." And he said, "Do you know what damage was done?" And I said, "No." And that's when he told me that I would be blind for the rest of my life. And to be honest with you, I took up my stride there and then. It really didn't impinge on me at all, really, until that night when I went to bed. I was in bed on my own. I cried for the one and only time that I remember about blindness. And I cried because I realised for the first time that I was never going to see my mommy and daddy again. And I suppose to a 10-year-old boy, that was a big thing. You know, you don't think about all the challenges that life has ahead, like getting a job, your education, or anything like that. I just felt that I was never going to see my mommy and daddy's faces again. And I cried myself to sleep that night. So that was me, really. The next day I woke up and started to get on with my life, really. And I suppose I would say that day was the first day of the rest of my life as a blind person. I eventually went back to the primary school I was at. Then I went on to the local secondary school or high school or whatever. I went to university from there, got my degree in 1983. I'm married in 1984. I have 2 children, Neve and Enya. And I done a lot of things after I was shot, learned how to play the guitar, played in bands and things like that. And then in fact, I used to play down in Carlow, down in a place called the Seven Oaks down there.
Really, yeah?
Yeah, I used to play in the Seven Oaks Sunday night. You never went on stage until about 12:15.
Yeah, really?
Good God, it used to be knackered before you went on stage. But so I done all that, and then me and my girlfriend and my wife now, Rita, we set up a folk choir that sang at Mass on a Saturday night. 40 years on, we're still doing that. Well, we're not in at the minute because of COVID, but you know, we've done that. And then, you know, I was compensated by the British government for being shot, and with half the money I bought a house, the other half I bought a pub. 2 years later, I bought a second pub, and then, so by the time I was 20 years of age, I owned 2 pubs in the centre of Derry, and I came out of university and went straight into an office I had above one of the pubs and began to run my own business for about 14 years. I became a director of Derry City Football Club in the mid-90s, which was fantastic. I was a fan of Derry City, and it was great to be just in the inner workings.
Yeah, because if you were to look at what you've done with your life as a young man, you know, you'd never think you were reading, you know, all the achievements of someone who was blind. You know, when you say about playing in the bands and, you know, becoming a Derry City football director, owning the 2 pubs and, you know, playing guitar, everything you've done, you know, you still had a very a full life, it would seem.
I mean, looking back on it, you know, it was and is a full life, really. And, you know, and I enjoyed everything I did. And I suppose, you know, I'm blind. I know I'm blind, but blindness I never really felt that blindness was something that could hold me back. You know, I was still a fully functioning human being, and you know, wanted to just do what I could enjoy doing. Now, you know, I can't pretend that I'm not blind, and so therefore, you know, you had to be at least aware of the choices you were making. You had to be aware of your limitations, but equally, you had to be aware of what your potential was as well. And, you know, I would often say it's not what you can't do that you focus on. You should focus on what you can do. And I was able to do certain things, and you know, that blindness didn't really present a problem. You know, blindness is a funny thing, I think, you know, in the sense that, I always say there's two broad things about being blind. One is, the physical side of blindness. Like I can't just, if you said to me, look, can I meet you down to town this afternoon in Derry here? I just can't go out and hop on the car and drive down, meet you there. So in that regard, blindness presents a physical issue. But then there's the emotional side of blindness, which I think can be the hardest thing to deal with if you don't get a grip on it. And the emotional side of blindness is the things that make you sad or make you happy, about not having your eyesight. And there are things that make me sad. Obviously, I miss not seeing my children, for example, and I'll never see my children. But and that's something that I'd be sad about. Even telling you about it now, I feel sad. But on the other hand, applying my logic, focus on what you can do, not what you can't do, I could allow my whole life to be dominated by the fact that I can't see my children, and lose out on all the other things that I can do with my children. I can take them for a walk, I can watch a movie, I can kick a ball in the garden with them. I've taught them how to ride bicycles, I can have conversations, I can watch a Disney movie, things like that. So is seeing them everything? It's a big part of it, and it's sad, but it's not everything.
Yes. I know I've watched a documentary on yourself recently, and it involved you were going to America, I think it was Utah maybe, and they were looking into an artificial sight and things like that. Did anything ever come of that, or did they ever put anything on the saying that maybe in a certain amount of time that you might get some sight? Or
well, to be honest, I never really fully followed up on it, Anthony. That was part of a BBC documentary, and I was delighted to do it, and I found it really interesting as well. And the one thing that trip proved to me at that time, we went to LA there, where we met a university guy who, basically was looking into research of, how do you link a camera to the brain, and he was looking at it from the point of view of using laser. A CD player, for example, uses laser, and more information. Your computer, my computer, of all laser drives and stuff like that. So laser carries much more information. So this guy in LA was looking at how you could get laser to communicate with the vortex of the brain, which is a part of the brain that manages your eyesight. And, because at the end of the day, your eyeball processes what you see sort of thousands of times, and then your brain processes that again, maybe thousands of millions of times. So if you want some kind of external camera to operate as effectively as an eyeball, then you need to be able to compute a lot of information to the brain. And this guy in LA was looking at that side of it. And then we went up to Utah, as you mentioned, and they were looking at a similar type way of connecting a camera to the brain. And then eventually in that trip, we went up to a guy in Canada who actually had a camera connected to his brain. That was actually incredible, because this guy Jens, he called him, and he's a lovely man. And Jens had basically two computer sockets, one behind each ear, and he had these cables running up from his waist, about the thickness of your thumb, plugged into these computer sockets. And the other end around the waist was plugged into a computer. And then this computer was strapped to his waist, basically. And, and then cables come out of that up to a pair of glasses that he had a camera in. So it was space age stuff in a way, and it was unreal. I found it really exciting and interesting in one way, and in another way I felt a bit weird about it, like when you're touching the back of a guy's head and he's got computer sockets. it's like some sort of RoboCop or something. But anyway, he was obviously connected up by something that was less than laser, sort of electrical impulses on a circuit board beneath the skull, just underneath the skull, and that was slightly piercing the brain. These small electrical pins, there were 500 of them or something, and they obviously communicated with that part of the brain. And so the resolution was per, something like 90 pixel or something like that. And you think of your average phone now, I don't know, many pixels in your phone. What is it, 1200 or 12,000 or something like that? I don't know what the pixel is on an average phone now, but this is 90 pixel. So it was just literally black and white shadows. So the good thing about it is it proved it could be done.
Yes.
But the sad thing about it was it really was nowhere near sufficient. And for somebody that desperately wanted their eyesight back, it didn't deliver. And I don't think it delivered for Ian's, in my view. And I just felt leaving that day that I was very happy being the person that I am, that I don't need to get my eyesight back, that I'm not looking to get my eyesight back. Yes, if God wants to give me a ring up today and suggest to me, Richard, maybe it's time to get your eyesight back, I would grab it with both hands, but I'm not going to pursue go on some kind of crusade and cling to something. And so your original question was, what more has happened? And I genuinely don't know. I come back from that, and that was the end of the communication with me, really. And, sometimes I sometimes would be curious about following it up, but at the same time, I'm 59 now, it would need to be something extremely, extremely zero risk and guaranteed a good level of success in terms of the outcomes as well as surviving any operation before I would even put myself through it.
Yes, that's true. I know what you mean. I just wanted to bring you back a bit to growing up in Craigan and Derry. It's hard to imagine, a 10-year-old when you're running around and you're seeing these outposts. You're one of the people who remembers what, like you said, it was like before it was occupied. But even I can imagine that would maybe shape your personality to a certain extent. We run around playing guns, in our outside our houses. It might be a very different scenario. Could you do everything you could do on occupied streets? Just how much of that embeds in your personality as you get older?
I think it's there. I don't think it's ever not there, Anthony. I think that anybody that's come through the conflict will always have a memory, a feeling, and hopefully it's not something that people find debilitating in terms of any impact that the trouble had on their, their ability to function or any sort of mental or nervous disorder or anything. And I think there is a lot of people where the troubles did really impact on the mental scars has been quite significant. If you had a loved one killed, if you witnessed stuff, but when I grew up in the Craigan and played around the Craigan, you're right, you might have played Cowboys and Indians down in Carlow. We played IRA men and soldiers in the Craigan. And we literally did. I can remember sitting in my brother's car outside our front house, at the front of our house, and I'd be the driver, and 2 or 3 of my friends would be, the other IRA men, let's say, and I'd be, driving the car and saying, pretending to drive the car and saying to the guys, right, we're just driving down Broadway now, yeah, right, we're coming down the Broadway, we're just going down Beechwood Avenue now, and we're going to pull in, and then, as I would brake, they would jump out of the car, all pretend and run round the back of my house and start shooting at the army, and then come run back and jump on the car, and we would speed off, and that's all in our imagination and all that. But that's the way it was. We used to stand and do checkpoints and stuff where IRA men wear masks, wear dark glasses, and all that sort of stuff, and do checkpoints and stuff where we were doing an IRA checkpoint because we saw IRA checkpoints in the area.
Yeah.
So, but there was the prevalence of, there was times when you were caught, there were shooting incidents, where you maybe had to dive into your own garden or get into your own house out of the road or lie down on the pavement. And that is very scary. And you never forget that, really.
Yeah. And I know Cragen is it's the vocal point of that song, There Were Roses, isn't that right? The old Irish song. And it's all about that as well.
I don't know that song now, I have to admit.
Oh, do you?
I'll look it up after now.
Yeah, it's a nice song. Well, not that it's a nice song. It's well put together, but it is.
Yeah.
It's about the troubles, but it's centered in on Cragen.
Jeepers, that's great. I must check that out.
Yeah,
There Were Roses.
Cara Dillon, I believe, does a very good version.
Cara Dillon, oh my God, she's brilliant.
I'll send you a link for it afterwards.
I do, surely.
I do know. You were talking about people who were affected, and I do know on that fateful day. It wasn't the only thing that happened that year. Like you said, Bloody Sunday was only 3 weeks apart, or 3 months apart, was it, from when you got shot? And I know that impacted home as well for another reason. I believe your uncle lost his life on that.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right. My uncle Jared, my mommy's brother, was shot dead on Bloody Sunday as well. And he was a father of 8 children, and I can remember Bloody Sunday very well. Sorry, that's my computer talking. I'll start that again. I can remember Bloody Sunday very well. I could see then, and I was doing my usual out in the street playing football with my friends, and I could see everybody all heading up to the march Sunday afternoon, maybe 2:00 or so. People starting to make their way up to Bishop's Field in the Cragen, because that's where the march started, up in the Cragen. And the plan was it would weave its way down through, up through the Cragen, down through the Bogside and Brandywell, and then try to make their way over to the Guildhall. And of course, as everybody knows, that they were blocked from going over to the Guildhall. So they walked over to Russell Street. And my uncle Jared was there, and I believe that he saw a man being shot, and he went out to help the man. And he had his arms in the air, and he was shot dead. He had his arms in the air waving a white hanky. That's eyewitness accounts. And funny, I was talking to a doctor afterwards. When I say afterwards, many, many, many years afterwards, like when I was an adult. And Dr. Raymond McLean in Derry, who read a book called The Road to Bloody Sunday. And Dr. McLean was one of these unique people where he was involved in the civil rights movement, so he would have been, aware of the march being planned and all that. He was also there on the day, and he was also, I think, the Pope's envoy, or at least somebody's envoy. I could be wrong about the Pope, but he was there as a medical representative at the autopsies. And he wrote a book called The Road to Bloody Sunday. But when I was talking to him, he was saying, look, in the world of investigations, let's say, the eyewitness accounts is tallied or compared with the forensic evidence. And the eyewitness account from my uncle Jared was that he walked out with his hands in the air waving a white hanky and he got shot. And originally, when the paramedics got there, they thought he had taken a heart attack. When you look at the forensics, the bullet entered my uncle Jared from the side underneath the armpit and came out the other side at the armpit. So the only way a bullet can enter you at the armpit is if your arms are in the air. Mm-hmm. And the paramedics, understandably, thought he'd taken a heart attack because they couldn't see the bullet wounds. Because once they shot him, his arms dropped. So, all that's very hard for people to hear, very hard for people to deal with. And it had a devastating effect on my mommy. And then less than 3 months later, I was blinded.
I know your mother
And
took that tough as well, didn't she? Like, not that she took it tough, but she had somewhat of a breakdown almost, didn't she? In that.
yeah, oh God, my mommy just completely flattened her really. And my mommy was found a couple of times walking in the middle of the road through a main street in Derry talking to herself. But, you know, it was never diagnosed. But when you hear the stories, you know that my mommy had a mental breakdown. And obviously my daddy and the family nursed her through it, really. And, you know, I can remember at night lying in my bed, Anthony, and I was only out of hospital, and my mommy would come up and kneel beside my bed. And, you know, the one thing my parents were was two very devout Catholics. They had great faith, went to Mass every day of their lives. And, you know, she went up and she was kneeling beside my bed, and she thought I would have been sleeping. And she started to say her prayers. And then she broke down and started to cry, and she'd be crying out of control, sobbing and pleading with God to give me back my eyesight. And, obviously I pretend to wake up and she'd kind of pull herself together, So the impact on my mommy and my daddy was enormous. They had 12 children. I was the second youngest. So above me, there was 7 other boys and 3 girls. I had one brother that was younger. And, you can imagine the sense of injustice that my brothers and sisters felt. Their uncle was shot down bloody Sunday. Their young brother was blinded. They were looking at the impact that it had on my daddy and my mommy. They'd probably seen it in their faces every single day. And then when I come out of hospital and I'm in the house and they're seeing what blindness actually means. Like one of my brother Gregory said to me one time that it never really registered with him that I was blind initially until he was looking out our back window and he saw me out in the backyard trying to kick a football. And although the football was about, a couple of inches away from my foot, I kept missing it. And it was only then that he thought to himself, Richard is actually blind. And, for a whole family to witness that, and my mommy and daddy, they have to deal with that, manage that, keep the lid on that, as well as deal with a real deep sense of hurt and pain that they had themselves. It must have been very difficult, And it's only now when I have children of my own, Anthony, I have 2 daughters. And when they were born, like our niece's 31 now and Enya's 28, and, when they come into the world, the love that you feel for your children, the envelope that opens in your heart, it's just something that you can never guess what it's like. And all you want to do is protect them every day of their lives. You don't want anybody to say anything wrong to them. You don't want anybody to hurt them. But my daddy, I'm sure, felt the same as me. And when we were children, and I remember when my daughter was 10 years of age. I remember when my daughter was 10 years of age. I remember thinking, you're the age I was when I was blinded. And she was just a child, And it just gives you it gave me a greater sense of where my daddy was at. Because or my mommy, dared anybody hurt my daughter at 10 years of age, and I would hit anybody to hurt her, and I would hit at that young innocent age. So I can empathize and sympathize with how my parents really felt, but at the same time, I also admire their strength, because despite all of that, I never heard him say an angry word. I never heard them promote any bitterness or hatred. In fact, they promoted the opposite. So to me, that just tells me the caliber of my parents.
Yeah. I know, can I bring you back to when it actually happened? You know, do you have memory of the moment the bullet hit? Or, because I know you ended up going and meeting the soldier many years later. But can you remember, you know, I often hear if, you know, people get into a car crash a few weeks afterwards, they can, you know, have a kind of a flashback of when it happens, you know, when they're lying in the bed. And did you have any of that, or do you remember exactly when the bullet hit and were you knocked out unconscious?
Yeah. What I remember, Anthony, was, you know, I don't remember the shot, don't remember the bang, nothing like that. I remember, I suppose, the seconds before it, really. You know, it's hard to be precise about that, but I remember approaching the Sanger on my right-hand side. And then the next thing I remember, as I woke up and I was lying on the school canteen table, where my music teacher, Mr. Giles Doherty, he heard the bang. He ran up, he found me lying on the ground, he lifted me and carried me and put me on the school canteen table. So, and I remember him talking to me and saying to me, you know, what's your name, son? And I told him my name was Richard Moore. And he got a bit of a shock because he knew me very well, but he wasn't able to identify me because of the extent of the injuries. And then I remember waking up in the ambulance. And at that stage, my daddy and my sister were beside me. I only lived a few minutes walk from the school, so eventually the word filtered up to our house that Richard had been shot. And God knows, like my daddy didn't know what to expect when he ran down the hill to the ambulance. You know, I don't know if he expected me to have a broken leg or a broken arm or whatever, and then he walks in and he sees this gruesome sight, really. And I remember my daddy was holding my hand and he kept saying, "You'll be all right, Richard, you'll be okay." So that's as much as I remember about the incident itself. You know, I don't remember hearing the bang or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me the story of how you eventually came to find the soldier?
Well, as you know, Anthony, I have to say I've never harboured any bitterness or any hatred towards the soldier, towards the British Army or anything like that. And, you know, I would boil that down to the fact that I come from a good family. I boil it down to the fact that, you know, my parents didn't have any anger or hatred, as I mentioned already. And then I also boil it down to the fact that the impact of blindness was reduced on me by the people around me, my family, my friends, the local community, and all of that. So blindness maybe wasn't as bad for me as it could have been. So I never really had any anger, any bitterness towards the soldier. And, you know, I grew up through my life not even thinking too much about anger or bitterness. And then eventually I began to see my story in the context of forgiveness. And I realized that I forgave the British soldier that shot me. And I began to become aware of, you know, this isn't a bad thing, that I'm a lot happier because I'm like this. So I got curious about the soldier. I wondered who he was. And then eventually, you mentioned the documentary earlier on, the people that made that documentary, Hotshot Films in Belfast, a guy called Brenton Byrne. They tracked down the soldier. And that was it was 2005 that I found out his name from them. And then in January 2006, I flew to Scotland and met Charles for the first time. And it was an amazing thing. You know, they sit at a table opposite the man that blinded me for life. and caused all those hurts to me and my family. You know, and to like him was an incredible thing. And well, that was 2006, and this is now 2020, and me and Charles are good friends and have remained good friends.
Did he ever tell you why he pulled the trigger?
If you were to ask Charles that, he would say that, first of all, in his view, rubber bullets didn't really cause any damage. And second of all, that when he fired the rubber bullet, if he fired it to get the children to, quote, bugger off home, unquote. So that would be Charles's logic. There's a lot of holes you can pick in that. You could have an argument with that in itself. You know, rubber bullets didn't cause damage. Like, you know, there's children have been killed by rubber bullets. You know, Stephen McConaughey in Derry was killed by a rubber bullet. Julie Livingstone in Belfast. And there's other people who have been badly injured by rubber bullets. You know, Emma Groves in Belfast was blinded by a rubber bullet. And the information's there and the evidence is there that proves that rubber bullets are lethal weapons and were lethal weapons. And then around, you know, firing it at a group of children, the quote, bugger off home, unquote. Like, that's not what rubber bullets are meant for. You know, and now I'm saying all that so that you or anybody listening to this knows that I'm very aware of the fragility of Charles's arguments or points that he makes. But at the same time, I have a logic, a philosophy, let's say. And in my view, Charles acted carelessly. Charles acted recklessly. And there's no justification for firing a rubber bullet in those circumstances. But I also think that in Northern Ireland, in the 70s, it was a crazy place to live. It was a crazy environment. And I think over the 30-year period of the conflict, people done things in a normal society they would never have done. And I think we're lucky if we get through our life without doing something that we regret for the rest of our lives. And I think Charles done something that he regrets. I believe that. I don't believe that he meant to blind a 10-year-old boy, but I believe that he fired a rubber bullet recklessly. So I think the important part about my story, and I realize the story as a backdrop, I realize the story has shaped my life, the person I am, the work that I do, the life that I've had, has all been dictated by the fact that I've been shot and blinded by a rubber bullet. But at the same time, what's important about my story is not being shot itself. It's what happened from the moment I was shot. If you only focus on the shooting and the soldier, then it is the negative side of the story. But what happened from the moment I was shot? How was a 10-year-old boy able to bounce back and have the life that I've had? You know, if anybody listening to this is thinking anything positive or anything remarkable about my life, and I don't know if they are or not, and I can't suggest that they do, but if they are, that's the part of the story that they should start to think about and ask themselves, how is that possible? How is it possible? And it's possible because of the amount of love and compassion that I've experienced in my life. My family, my friends, the local community, they put me back together. I've been on the receiving end of so much kindness and so much generosity throughout my life. To the point where I was able to, like you said earlier on about me having a remarkable life, to the point that I was able to have a full life, an enjoyable life, a positive life, to the point where I didn't really miss my eyesight that much. To the point where I was able to have a full and active life, and blindness was there. It always will be there, but it didn't stop me from being a happy, contented individual. And why was I able to forgive the soldier? Why did I not have any anger? Because of that love and compassion, because of that example that my parents gave me. Why did I set up a children's charity called Children in Crossfire? And I know that's how you started the interview, talking about the name Children in Crossfire. I started Children in Crossfire because all as I ever wanted to do was give back some of what I received. Because I realized that every child in life, no matter how difficult the circumstances, can grow and blossom and contribute in a positive way to their own life and the lives of their families and their community. I realized that as a young adult. So I set up Children in Crossfire to help children in other parts of the world who might not have been in the crossfire of bombs and bullets, but were in the crossfire of poverty. They mightn't have had bullets flying over their head, but they had decisions being made throughout the world that were impacting on their lives and was equally as devastating as any bomb or bullet. Children are dying every day from lack of food, lack of medicine, lack of water. And, that's wrong. That's an injustice. And that's something that you and me can do something about. But why am I doing all that? If there's a child alive today in Tanzania and Ethiopia where Children of Crossfire work, it's not because of me. It's not even because of Children in Crossfire. It's because of those people in my life that showed me real love and compassion. That showed me that you can have a life. That showed me that you can get over something as terrible as losing your eyesight. And you don't have to be angry about it. You don't have to be bitter about it. There's different ways to deal with it that are as beneficial to you and are beneficial to the people around you. So, that's why I say to you, the important part about my story is not being shot and blinded. It's what happened from the moment I was shot and blinded. That is far more interesting, far more exciting than being shot and blinded itself.
I want to ask you, Richard, I don't know if you're a man of strong faith or anything, but there's a statement that some things happen for a reason. I know, that fateful day when you were shot, it did turn out to be a turning point in your life, which you probably wouldn't have gone on to do to start Children in Crossfire if it didn't happen. I don't know how you feel about that things happen for a reason. I do know, I've heard you say before that you actually, funny enough, asked to be off school the day it happened. Is a coincidence. What is your thoughts on that?
I can guess like everybody else, I suppose. Sometimes I can't help feeling that it happened for a reason. And then sometimes I think, if God had a reason to do it, then would there not have been a better way to get me to do what I'm doing today? Yeah. But so I I flip with the logic of it. I think that maybe in some ways this is all meant to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes, when I thought about that sort of most was when I met Charles.
Mm-hmm.
Because, throughout my 33 years of my life of blindness, the first 33 years, I didn't know the soldier's name, didn't know one thing about him, nothing. And I always imagined it was an 18-year-old soldier in an army lookout post on the edge of a no-go area, barely a child himself, basically, crapping himself. And when I found out his name, I found out when he shot me, he was a captain and he was in his 30s. And I remember thinking to myself, God, you're really giving me a mountain to climb here, aren't you? I mean, it just couldn't be the romantic story or the innocent story that I had built up in my head. Mm-hmm. It had to be an 18-karat gold, well-established, well-trained army captain that shot me. So that gave me a whole new challenge. It took away that sense of logic that I could have applied to that young soldier being nervous at an army lookout post, when really it was a well-trained, well-disciplined army captain. So I sometimes think God wasn't giving me any handy way out and forcing me to process and deal with, blindness and being shot with no excuses that I could apply to give myself an easy way to sort of forgive. And, so in that way, I sometimes think maybe it was meant to be, maybe there's a, and then, I think, when you think about it was meant to be, Anthony, has it given me some kind of a status, that there was a greater plan for Richard, and maybe not. So, in all honesty, I just don't know, but I do flip with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know that your story alone has very positive impact, regardless of the actions you take with the children of Crossfire. Even your story, I think, has great impact. And I'm going back to the night where I first heard you speaking in Carlow, because I have a kind of a bizarre story that led me to hearing you speak in Carlow. Can you remember that night you were down in Carlow? You've probably been down there so many times now at this stage.
No, I remember being in Carlow. I was only ever there once speaking. Was it in a chapel?
It was, yeah.
I was only there once speaking in a chapel, so I remember it all right, Yeah.
Well, I remember. I'll give you a bit of context of how impactful that was on me. I was going through a bit of we'd say, kind of a spiritual warfare kind of thing, in my own personal life. Since I was very young, I used to think I'd see kind of shadowy kind of things, at night, and it followed me right up till I was 27 even. And it really had an impact on maybe my personality, but just I wasn't very religious at all. I had no thoughts of it. I always believed maybe there was a God, but I didn't go to mass every weekend, and my family didn't either, But I do remember that one night, I asked out in a prayer. I said, "Jesus, I trust in you," and all the worry and anxiety it was causing went away, and whatever I believed I was seeing was gone. And this was the same week I met you. So what had happened was I spoke to my nana and I asked her for a Bible, and a Jesus I Trust in You painting the portrait. And I hung it up. And the next day, I was on the way home from work, and I got this thought popped into my head of that chapel that you were in Carlow. No, I didn't know you were there. I'd never stepped foot in the chapel, but it kept. I drove from Dublin. I work in Dublin. I was coming back to Carlow, and it kept popping up in my head over and over. So much so, I had to turn the radio off. And regardless of that, though, I still didn't go because I felt as though, I didn't know if anything was on, or I thought it was a random thought. So anyway, I pulled up outside my home, and a car pulled up beside me, and it was an elderly couple, and they says to me, "Do I know where this chapel is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just a kilometre down there on the left-hand side." And they didn't say thank you. It was a very strange interaction. They just drove off or rolled off, So anyway, I thought that was bizarre as well, because I'd been thinking about this church. So I went in anyway, still didn't go, still fought the urge to go to the chapel. I went in and started cooking up a bit of dinner, and I still remember I was throwing a chicken stir fry on for myself, So I decided, I said to myself, you know what, I just look up the name of this chapel on my phone. And I did, and a link popped up that I'd never seen before. Not that I Googled many churches at the time, but it was a live feed to the chapel. And as I hit onto it, the priest was talking to everybody at the very start, and he said, just so happened it was 7:00 or whatever it was, and mass was starting. He said, "If we have a very special night for you tonight, and if anyone is at home who thinks they should be here, you should come on down." And I turned off the Hobbit and I said, right, enough is enough. I'm going to go down there and see what the story is. But as I approached the church, I got in the car, went down. I could see the queues of cars. You couldn't park anywhere. But there was one space outside the church. And this is true as God. Now, I walked up and I seen people were spilled outside the church, couldn't even get inside. And a man took me, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "There's one space for you inside, son." And he opened the door for me. And as I walked in, still not knowing why I was there or how I got there, another man came over to me and handed me the leaflet of the night, the mass, and pointed me. And there was people all standing on the inside of the chapel with no seats. And he pointed me over to one seat left. And I couldn't understand how this seat was empty. So I sat in anyway. And that was the night that you got up and you spoke. And I couldn't see you from where I was. There was big grey pillars. But then you said you were blinded. And the story you told about how the difficult circumstance in your life, you made such a strong meaning from that. So what you had gone through, you had turned your life around to help others. And now that was your new meaning in your life, and that's what you were doing with children in Crossfire. And it really kind of landed home with me. I used to have dreams where I was in a big crowded area, and a bomb would go off or a riot would take out, and I'd be blinded. And I had this dream for 20 years, and someone would have to grab me by the hand and lead me away to safety. But when I listened to your story and what was happening to me that week, I kind of had a new focus on my life almost, like I knew it impacted my mental health very positively. So when I walked out of that chapel door, I couldn't just drive home then. I did hang around. I went up to you and I didn't even know what to say to you. And I just said, "Look, I just happened by mass tonight. I heard your story." And from whatever words I could piece together, I said that, I was trying to say I appreciated your story. I appreciated that. It felt as though this was another thing that happened. Like I said, things happen for a reason. I was meant to be down in that church, and the first sign wasn't bringing me there. The second sign wasn't bringing me there. I was given multiple signs, and even for the people welcoming me in the front door, and I heard your message. And I don't know if I'd be doing this podcast if it wasn't for your story that night. And if this podcast goes down next week and no one listens to my podcast anymore and I have to pull the plug, I am happy that I got a chance to have you on it. and for other people to hear your story, and that maybe they might get such a positive impact that I got from that night.
That's very good. Well, thank you for that, Anthony. You know, and it's lovely to hear that story from me because, you know, I remember one time I was going to speak in a chapel in Oma, and Ursa, the person you spoke to that linked us up in the office here, Ursa was driving me to Oma that night, and I was saying there, you know, maybe it's time for me to stop telling my story. You know, and I kind of always pride myself in thinking that I know when to stop things, or, you know, that I'm not doing it for me. Mm-hmm. And so that night going up the road, I was going, you know, maybe it's time for me to stop telling my story. Maybe, you know, people have heard enough of me, really, and they heard enough of my story. And I wasn't being modest. I'm sharing a kind of an innermost thought, in a sense, with you. It's not something, you know, that I'm saying to you for any other reason than that. And Ursa says to me, well, look, you know, see how you feel. Look, you're go up tonight anyway, and that sort of thing. So I went up and I done the talk, and there was something quite remarkable happened to me that night as well up there, because the person that introduced me onto the altar that night was a young girl called Aveen Monaghan. And it was only after I gave my talk that I discovered Aveen's mammy and her granny and a sibling and an unborn sibling as well were killed in the Oma bomb. And she was 10 years of age when that happened. And that night she was 18 years of age. And the next day the teacher rang me to say that, you know, that Aveen got a lot out of the talk or something like that. And I suppose I felt my question was being answered. And when you say to me now, what you've just shared with me now, then sometimes I think, you know what? It's really, really worth it when somebody like you, like, I don't know, it's maybe 4 or 5 years now since Carlo, if not longer, something I can't no track of time really, but it's been a few years anyway, and there you are doing a podcast here today, which is down to you and nobody else. But it's nice to think that you remembered me, first of all, and second of all, that, you know, that you feel that I had a part to play in it, because that makes it worthwhile. Ultimately, why am I doing this? Why are you doing this, Anthony? Why are you doing a podcast? Why am I talking and sharing my story? Because if I'm just sharing my story just for me to talk about myself, then, to be honest, we have lost any sense of direction or whatever. But I know that, and I share my story because I more and more believe that it's through stories that you help people deal with what's going on in their life. And I'll tell you a story that I heard once. I don't know if I'm going on about much here, but I'll tell you a story that I heard once, and then sure, you can tell me to shut up then. But
no, walk away.
And I don't know if you know anything about guitars or stringed instruments, but if you have 2 acoustic guitars in a room, one sitting at one side of the room and the other sitting at the other side of the room, and you pluck, say, the A string on the guitar, on one guitar, the A string and the other guitar vibrates. Mm-hmm. And that's true. I heard that story and I tested it because of a guitar player. When you pluck the A string on one of the guitars, the A string on the other guitar vibrates. And the reason why that person was telling that story that I heard was because they were saying the human heart's the same. And when you share your story, or your experience, then it responds, the person listening responds from the heart as well. And like you telling your story there now, Big Linda Chapel, you know, it's a fantastic story. I don't know if you realise that. And just the whole thing from driving from Dublin and the sort of signals you were getting.
Yeah, I haven't told that story much, and I guess this podcast probably to me is this episode is a long time in the making because of the impact your story had on me doing it, and I get what you're saying with the, you know, I play acoustic myself and my brothers.
Oh, there you are.
And but I never do that about the A string, and that's great.
It could be any of the strings. I just choose the A string because I always be afraid to choose the G string. And that means something different.
You know, I do think that your story is important, and I'm really glad you continue to share it, because, you know, you never know when there's someone else sitting in the back aisle of the chat who's meant to be there. And, you know, I think I have shared a story with one or two of my closer friends. I've never shared it on the podcast, but I do think, you know, how I found myself. I remember sitting in that church pew thinking, how did I get here today? You know, it was more or less pulled there. And it's the strangest, most bizarre night, but I got so much out of it. And I do credit you for influencing me to do this. And you know, when I say this podcast, you know, it's called Training Thought and Truth. And really it's like a physical, mental and spiritual health thing. And that's why I like guests to come on and tell their story, because I think, like you said about the strings intertwining and relating with people, I think that some guests can relate to people. And when I see people listening in different parts of the world, you know, I'm thinking, I hope they get something. I said a prayer last night. I said, I hope this podcast goes well. I hope Richard enjoys the chat. And I hope it reaches someone the way it reached me, the same story. Because even if it reached one person, you know, even if that story in Carlo only reached me, and then maybe the echo effect from today's podcast might reach somebody else. And I really think that's why a lot of things, when I say they happen for a reason, like, you know, since that week, I've been guided in certain directions. And that was the beginning of it. And I have to say that I'm very honoured that you've come on and tell your story today.
Thank you.
Are you playing much guitar lately?
I play a bit. Well, you know, I have a recording set up at home, and you know, recording studios now are all on a computer. You know, so I have a recording set up at home, and I, you know, have my guitars all hanging on the wall there, and you know, so I try to create my own music. You know. Fairly middle of the road sort of stuff. I don't write songs, lyrics. I would love to be able to write lyrics. I'm really trying to do that, but I haven't been successful. But I haven't had the confidence or whatever. But writing tunes, I do it all the time, and and then I give up playing with a band years ago when I started Children of Crossfire back in '96. But I still play in the folk group and stuff like that there. And obviously we're off for a few months now, that lockdown and all that's been happening, but we'll get back on that. But to keep me hand on, I record at home quite a bit, you know, and I love that creative side too, you know, where you're starting with the drum kits and the bass guitar and the keyboards and, you know, the guitar and the lead guitar and several guitars and overlaying guitars and stuff. I do all that, you know, and enjoy all that experimenting, you know, what we sound. So I kind of keep my hand on that way. In fact, my guitar is just sitting opposite me there. Because I'm teaching a friend of mine in the office here. One of the girls that work in the office, I'm teaching her the guitar.
Oh, very good.
During lockdown, she decided to learn the guitar. So,
where can we hear some of your own stuff? Are you posting it up?
Not yet. I'll send you a copy. It's only instrumentals, you know, one or two instrumentals, and you know, in fact, I don't know if I said that I'm doing my own podcast.
That's right. What about you? Is that right?
Yeah, what about you? That's right. And again, it's about personal stories, I suppose. And well, you know, when I've come across many interesting people in my life, And, it's very interesting, even you interviewing me, because I'm seeing it from both sides, and I'm enjoying it. But I what was I trying to say now? I've lost the thread of my thought now. What were we talking about there? I created my own piece of music as a theme tune for the podcast. And again, that was a project. First of all, just to create the piece of music from scratch, and then get into the podcast then separately. So I kind of was I'm very interested in radio. I have a radio station up here in Derry called Drive 105, which is a community radio station, one of these community radio stations. And so I'm very interested in radio. I'm very interested in music, very interested in recording and editing and all that. But it took a wee bit of courage to get into the interviewing bit and sitting down with people and chatting to them. I don't know about you, but I'd be nervous when I go on to chat to somebody. And so I done every stalling exercise. I wanted to do this, but I thought, right, I'll create my own music first. So that took me about 3 months to sort of create my own piece of music. But when all of that was done and the platforms were set up and the only thing left was, Richard, you need to start interviewing people. Then that's when I really had to sort of go for it. So, but I've a couple now under my belt, and I don't know about you, but I just get so much out of it myself, chatting to people. And
yeah, well, like this now, I don't get nervous of all my guests. I did get nervous today because this was an important one for me.
All right.
And like the first one I got,
yeah,
it's the same like that. But
so how long are you doing it, Danny?
I'm doing it since the year before last, so 2019, around June.
Amazing.
Now it's just 30-second episode, and a lot of people would say that's very little for how long I'm doing it. But I would rather put out the quality rather than the quantity. Sometimes it might take me 2 months before I get another guest lined up, but I'd rather get the right guest, and I'd rather just I know when people see another episode popping up that that I put a bit of thought into it,
yeah. And what do you say? It's 30-second.
30-second. This is episode 32. Yeah.
Oh, right. I think it says 30-second episodes, like it was 30 seconds long. I was thinking, my God, how would I edit this down?
No, but and I love the music, and as well, I do the editing, I do all the rest, and I love to hear about you're getting into the music side of things as well, because it's such a creative thing, isn't it? It's one of those things that gives you this feeling. Like I've often had people on. I'd be a big believer now ever since that week 4 years ago. But my faith has got very strong, and I've even gone to Israel last year. I got a gift for my 30th to go off my partner, and she went with me. And I've since then had a few people come on the podcast who were atheists and kind of challenged me over it. But I've been digging into the historicity of the man of Christ, and I wanted to know every angle of it,
Yeah.
And it just built my faith and built it. And a big part of this, that's why it's trained thought and truth. I guess the truth is, I am the truth, I am the way, the light, and the truth. And I just think that it's one of the arguments I put, music gives you that type of feeling that's not tangible. It's not scientific, it can raise the hair on the back of your neck and it can inspire you. And if you can kind of hopefully you can share that feeling on through the stories. And I know you telling your story has such an impact, and that's why I wanted to give you my little story to add to your story.
I loved it, yeah. No, but I loved it. I really did. And, I loved hearing the story about your journey. And I was just thinking, God, how many signals did you need? It sounded like...
Yeah, there's probably more. And the bizarre, like, that, I still remember like it was yesterday, that I had to turn the radio off. This, it's an hour-long journey. It was an hour and a half because of traffic. Pulling up, the car, the minute I stopped my car and got out, this car pulled up beside me. and the most bizarre people. They just drove off, and it was like they're saying, "Do you know where the church is? Because we do. We're going there."
I know, it's like switching the radio off just wasn't going to work.
I know, and the webcam, when I hit that, I'd never seen a webcam in the church before. They still have it.
My God. Hey, do you know, I actually blame you then for me having to go the whole way to Carlo.
Yeah, true.
Because you don't realise I got a phone call to say, look, there's this guy in Carlo, we're trying to get him on the mass.
You're wondering why the radio didn't work all the way down.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But look,
it's been great.
Tell me, I know that this COVID has put a stop to a lot of events and fundraisers and all that. Do you have anything big coming up this side of the year?
Yes, we do. I mean, we've been doing a lot of stuff, online fundraising, like virtual walks and virtual Caminos, walk 100 mile in September and stuff like that there. We're actually doing an abseil on the 29th of November down the side of the Tower Museum. I'm not, well, they want me to do it, and I'm still sort of playing around with the idea of doing it, but we'll see. And then we'll do a fast on the 23rd of December through the 24th of December, just a 12-hour, 24-hour fast. They haven't decided yet. When I say they, I mean the fundraising team on here. And then, you know, so there's a lot. We have our Advent campaign, which basically starts really now at the end of November, you know, where we, you know, particularly the chapels in the Derry diocese are, you know, let us distribute our Advent boxes out through the chapels and stuff. And, you know, to be fair, the Catholic diocese in Derry have been extremely supportive of Children Crossfire for many years through the Advent campaign. And then we have, you know, people supporting us during Advent and stuff like that as well. And it's very important for us. It's a difficult time, you know, for charities. Our complete fundraising sort of plan has been flatlined and had to be changed and adopted. Again, thanks to the team and the support base we have. We've held our own for the last, you know, 5 or 6 months. But, you know, we have the full year to go. And, you know, and hopefully things will start to improve, Anthony, you know, that we can get back to normality in terms of what the charity does. But I always like to go out to the projects as well, and I can't go out to Africa at all. So I'm really dying to get out there to see how things are going, you know, but that's just the way it is. And, you know, and it's funny, about maybe 5 weeks ago now, 6 weeks ago, I got an email from a guy in Ethiopia that would kind of work with Children in Crossfire out there. And there's a community there that we supported for 10 years, you know, a community that was living in a graveyard. There was 260 people who lived in a graveyard, really, in the centre of Addis Ababa. And, you know, we eventually, they were all, you know, the people were suffering from hunger, malnutrition, or lack of food, malnutrition, waterborne diseases. Children were living the most horrific lifestyle, really. They lived and slept on top of graves. Their toilet was the graveyard. They basically were involved in child prostitution and different things on the streets of Addis Ababa to earn money to try and feed themselves. And at the time, we got involved in it, and we eventually moved all 260 people, 60 families out in the condos that we bought, you know, which is one room sort of apartments basically. And they were dry, they were warm, they were, you know, had electricity, they had outdoor toilets, but they were proper outdoor toilets, you know, latrines, pit latrines and stuff. And we were the feeding program. We'd done the feeding program for about 10 years. And then eventually we phased out the feeding program because they began to, you know, we developed these income generating skills that they needed, you know, which was, you know, like soap making, candle making, broom making and stuff like that there. You know, they were starting to sell their products in the local market. And about 16 of the young people back in 2008, 2 years ago, had gone to university, gone to third level education. So it just shows you the potential. But 5 or 6 weeks ago, I was contacted by Gibber Miguel, who's a guy out there that kind of works for Children Crossfire. He said that because of COVID, the markets were all closed. Tanzania was in lockdown. And that whole community was facing starvation, really. So, it just shows you, how COVID can basically, we can see the impact of it here, but the additional impact in countries like Ethiopia or Tanzania is that people are forced into poverty. And this whole, as I say, these people had no income whatsoever, and they were facing starvation. So look at it that we were in a position to support a program. So we've taken on the commitment now to feed that community again for at least a year. I told them that's budgeted for a year, because we don't know how long this is going to go on for. And, it's easier to sort of say halfway through the year that they don't need the money anymore, or they don't need the support anymore, than it is to try and find the money again. So if we can factor it in, budget for it, it makes more sense from my point of view. So, but, it just shows you, how COVID can be, enormously detrimental to communities. The things maybe you never think about,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and you wouldn't, you think about how we all too much think about how it affects us directly, but we don't think about the charities that are affected and what's the end result for that and all.
That's right. But look, has it, our supporters have continued to support us and things like that, so yeah. But we've a lot to be grateful for. And it's not us really, but it's just, I get a great sense of relief when you're able to respond to something like that. Like, I know that community very well. I've been out in the graveyard when they were there, and I've been out visiting them every so often, and and it's just great to see them progressing, stand on their own 2 feet, and we just have to keep working at that, so that eventually, if COVID does hit, and another 5, 10, hopefully never, but another issue, that they're more resilient, that they don't need us to step in, and that's what you're always heading towards, and we will get there with that, but everything takes time, and resources. So, but there we are.
Yeah, very good. And tell me, I just wanted to ask you if you had any words for someone, maybe someone who's listening, who believes that maybe the odds are stacked against them, they're a bit down themselves, they're any parting words that they might get benefit from hearing from you.
Well, I would always say to somebody that, if my story is an example of anything, it's an example of how, no matter how difficult, no matter how hopeless a situation might seem, there is always a way out. There is always, we all possess the ability to navigate ourselves out of that. And the one thing that I learned about blindness is, I need people. I can't go anywhere without people. And I love that. I embrace that. And I embrace blindness. So never be afraid to ask for help, and never be afraid to accept help. To me, when you ask for help, it's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And, sometimes you have to look at the things that are maybe making you feel the way you feel and stuff like that. And everybody's different, and all situations are different. But I just think that if you can be confident, and you can be confident, that no matter how bad it is, there is always a way that you'll deal with it if you're open to talking to people, asking for help, and receiving help. And that's a story of my life. That's a story of every day of my life. So whatever people might think out there that listen to this show and think I'm confident and Mr. All Together and, I've got it all. I receive help every day in my life. And I love it. I love it. Because what blindness gives me is the opportunity to see people in a different way. And I think when you can embrace something and try to look for the positives in it, then, I think, you'll see them. You'll see the positives. So that's as much as I can say really on that, other than some of the stuff already said,
Has your faith been a big influence in your life, Richard? Has it had much?
I think, I'm not, I don't wear my faith on my sleeve, let's say. I don't preach or anything like that. Maybe I do and I don't realise it, but I think that certainly God played his part in my life, without a question. It is look, I can talk to you about family and the support that they give me. I can talk about friends and the support that they give me. But there was something else, a spirit in me that I believe is a God-given spirit that helped me deal with the things that I've dealt with. And I think that we all get signals in our life. We all get direction in our life. And sometimes we see it and we ignore it. And sometimes we see it and we follow it. And it's been open to seeing it. And in your story, God had an uphill struggle trying to get you to follow the signs. But he got you there in the end up, and you were open to it. And, the other thing is, we all look for happiness in life. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. And sometimes we look in the wrong places for happiness. And if you think of the things that make you happy, when you talk about, for example, helping people, you talk about children in Crossfire and the work we're doing, it makes me happy when I see that we can help somebody. It makes me happy when you tell me that my story helped you. And if you think if you help somebody across the road, if you deliver your groceries to somebody's house, if you do a kind act, think about how you feel. You feel happy. So I always think, if you're looking for happiness, that's where it is. It's in the kind and generous things that you do yourself. And you can find happiness by doing that. And contentment. And purpose. And it doesn't have to be setting up a charity. Sometimes the smallest of things make you happy when you do a kind thing for somebody. So you don't have to go very far. You don't have to buy a big car. You don't need 3 holidays. You don't need a massive house. I'm not saying those things aren't great to have if you can afford them. I'm just saying you don't need those things to be happy.
I think I think it's true what you said about, seeing the door being open, and the way you said about this, you feel this spirit that helped you through it. I think that's the same thing that was working in me that led me to that church, and I think it's the same thing I feel when I'm doing these episodes. I resonate with that an awful lot. And look, I really appreciate your time, Richard.
I enjoyed the chat, Anthony. Thank you.
It's been great. An honour to have you on, because, like I said, it's probably a long time making for me, unknowns to yourself. But
Well, it's here now, and no, I'm really delighted and privileged that I had a small part to play in whatever positive things happen in your life. It's just lovely for me to hear that, and thank you for sharing it.
yeah, well, I hope. Well, if anything, I hope it shows you that your message is still very strong and relevant, and I hope you continue with it, and I hope it reaches someone through this medium now as well.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Anthony.
Listen, thanks very much, Richard, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
On May 4th, 1972, while playing on a soccer field, a 10-year-old boy was struck by the rubber bullet of a British soldier in the town of Derry, Northern Ireland. This shot caused lifelong blindness, which changed the life of Richard Moore forever.
Troubles in Northern Ireland. The events of Bloody Sunday would come to define the conflict for many and leave a lasting legacy of bitterness and injustice.
you